So on behalf of our two boys, this podcast is dedicated to them. And without them, we wouldn't be able to bring this to life.
I think we're over 200 episodes, and I've had the privilege of interviewing reputable experts like Gabor Mate and Bruce Lipton. When I say ADHD is over, or even with my book, ADHD is not an emergency, they go, what do you mean? Because their identity has been formed by this thing. If you say anything that contradicts the mainstream ADHD narrative, they personally feel threatened.
And it's not their fault. We're not trying to parent shame here. You do what you think is right for your child. We've been brought up to trust these professionals, and we don't want to think that they've got it wrong.
So they cherry pick the first part of the story that supports the medication narrative, but then when you look at the rest of the research, it doesn't hold up.
Let's remind everybody, we've done all this research without getting paid. We're not sponsored by Big Pharma. We've had the children that have had these diagnoses. I've gone to hell and back. You are taking these children's futures away from them. So many families are ruptured from this, and they don't understand that their narrative is harming so many people.
That was awesome, Becca. That was like one of those monologues in a film towards the end where the main character is, I've had enough. When a child that's been medicated for years, I've seen so many horror stories of them now being also on antidepressants and on sleep medications. They can't keep a partner in a relationship. They lose their job. They're just a mess because the real wounds, the trauma that needed some healing and processing never got the chance to be processed.
This is from an Australian parenting expert called Dr. Justin Colson. He was sharing the real life story of a 12-year-old girl here in Australia being threatened with rape by classmates. His excuse, are you ready? ADHD. These labels are now being used as excuses for criminal activity.
He doesn't behave that way because of ADHD. He behaves that way because he's a traumatized child. Hurt people hurt people. So how were they hurt? And how can we heal that hurt? A medication Band-Aid isn't going to do it. There's going to be people that are going to make fun of it, and they're going to try to dissect it and call us liars or conspiracy theorists. I'm not threatened by that because I know that's not who I am.
You're certainly not. You're a legend in my eyes.
What you and I are doing with our movements, we're putting children first. We're giving them a voice. We're empowering them instead of disempowering them.
So many parents are so exhausted. If they can get the help and then come from a very loving, connected space with their child, it can make such a big difference.
If you look at homeopathy or other alternative methods, everything makes a difference because everything calms the nervous system down and restores balance.
And guess what, guys? These don't have any side effects. And the reason why they don't like having them advertised is because they can't make money from them. What is your vision for how you would love ADHD to be seen in the future?
First one would be that ADHD is no longer considered a disorder. It's not in the DSM. We've adjusted the education system to accommodate unique learning styles. We realize that medication is too dangerous.
We don't have any ulterior motives for this. We hope that you can listen to this and you can feel our heart and the love that we have for these beautiful children. I call them beautiful souls. Pause, think, do your own research and really think about what's best for your child. I would just like to leave the last words to you, Roman.
My last words are very simple. Trust your intuition. If it's not an internal impulse, it'll be an external influence. Don't just medicate and sedate the child because you're missing out on all this beautiful growth that could come from that diagnosis.
A very warm welcome to the show, Roman Wyden. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Becca. I'm so happy to be here. Excited.
Well, we are very passionate about this topic, which is ADHD. So I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting conversation. I came across your amazing podcast, ADHD Is Over, about 5 years ago. So I've known you in terms of, listening to your podcast on and off for that time. You've only known me a few weeks because I reached out to you and said, would you mind being a guest? Because I've got this topic and it's really important, and you kindly agreed to come on. So I'm just wondering, like, how are you feeling at this present moment about this topic and speaking with me about it today?
Yeah, thank you for that little prehistory. Uh, I'm here because I really felt your passion and your inspired acting upon, right, reaching out. And so I'm always a yes to that energy. And so I'm here feeling really great because I love making a difference. I love sharing stories that I've experienced that I can share with parents in the hopes that they can perhaps avoid some of the, we talked about this, but some of the pitfalls or the cracks of the ADHD narrative, right?
Mm. And I couldn't think of a more perfect person to come on to talk about it. So thanks again. Now, I normally start by asking my guests, what are you grateful for at the moment?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for my two boys, Kai and Etienne, and their health. I'm grateful for um, having gone through an amicable divorce. Grateful for my co-parent, if you will. Grateful for my new relationship with my beautiful partner, her son, and this idea of perhaps blending and creating a new family.
Mm.
I'm grateful for the weather and where I live and for all my friends and community that I have around me. And mostly I'm grateful to be on platforms like yours and being able to share what I'm passionate about. So, yeah,
I think that's
thanks.
definitely going to be showing. So thank you for sharing all of that. Now, I thought we'd begin before we get really deep into the conversation and your podcast with a definition of ADHD. So, for those that are new to the term, and I'm sure there's not many, but if you have been living under a rock and you're not quite sure, I decided to get the definition off the CDC website because it was the most recent one that I could find, the latest date being 23rd of October 2024. So I'm just going to read this definition out from their website. ADHD is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders of childhood. Neurodevelopmental means having to do with the way the brain grows and develops. ADHD is usually first diagnosed in childhood and often lasts into adulthood. Children with ADHD may have trouble paying attention, controlling impulsive behaviors. They may act without thinking about what the result will be, or be overly active. There are three different ways ADHD presents itself, depending on which types of symptoms are strongest in the individual at the time of diagnosis. The three are predominantly inattentive presentation, predominantly hyperactive impulsive presentation, or a combined presentation. The website goes on to say the causes of ADHD are unknown, which I find a bit bizarre because if they can send people up to space and do some incredible things, why can't they figure out the cause? So that's already a bit sus to me. And anyway, these scientists have identified some possible risk factors. Number one is genetics. Number two is exposure to environmental risks, for example, lead during pregnancy or at a young age. And number three, alcohol and tobacco use during pregnancy and other pregnancy related factors. Number four, child health conditions, including head injuries. And number five, parental mental health and family environment. What was your response be to that definition to start with?
Oh, Becca, so many things. Well, you kind of ended it with, I would say, the only glimmer of hope in that what you just read in that copy, and that is that they're considering the parental or the family environment, right? The influence, because that's really the main thing I've found, and we'll get into that. But so that said, I mean, that's good. Um, I find their definition, if we were to read it again, you see all these things that they think the causes are all like physical, or it's in the brain, or it's, you know, it's physical factors from the exterior. So I see where that made sense maybe in the 50s. And like you said, we've now gone to the moon. We're planning to go to Mars. We have spaceships, we have submarines, we have all this crazy stuff. And yet, somehow, we haven't figured out what ADHD is or what causes it. And part of it is science and medicine is supposed to stay open and we continue the exploration. But I think it's partly because there is no real cause. There is no ADHD. It's not like we're trying to explain something that actually logically doesn't make sense and scientifically also doesn't make sense. And
Mm,
so, in a way, you're reading a description of a made up disorder. When I say made up, literally made up, because it's based on observations, right? And you label things, behaviors.
mm-hmm,
So it's a decent description, but it's of something that we need to evaluate
mm,
and really come to terms with that it's not a disorder per se, like a
mm,
mental disorder or a disease of the brain, but it's really a learning and living difference, and that's each child is unique. So how do we cater to each individual differently,
mm.
right? There's no one size fits all. So it's kind of a one size fits all description of something that's antiquated, and we'll get into it more. But yeah, that would be my initial answer.
Beautiful. Yeah, and we will be getting into it, and we're going to start with your story and what led you to creating the podcast. So if you could share your story, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. I always try to make a long story short, but I'll keep enough texture and fat so that it's relevant, right? So, about 9 years ago, we were called to our son's Kai's school. At the time, he was 7.
Yeah.
And we were told that, well, he's been, disruptive, and we think you should we may think has ADHD. You should get him tested. And I remember thinking, wow, okay. Well, I want to know what the tests say because I didn't feel like there's anything wrong with my son. And so we got him tested, and the diagnosis came back. It was like 6 of them. It was like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and uh, like it just kept goes like a long list. And I was like,
Mm,
wow, really? I do not see any of that. And so I had to trust that instinct. I said, well, we're going to get him like evaluated, but I'm not going to jump into any medication, even though the school recommended it. They said, if you want him to get the value of the school and if you don't want him to end up a delinquent drug user, go to prison kind of, human, then you better start medicating. And so that pressure or sort of like almost future guilt that came from the teacher and the principal was really hard to hold back, because they're technically experts, right? They're teachers and principals and doctors, but I trusted my parental, intuition, and I said, this we're not going to medicate. We're just going to get a test, and then we'll see. And then we got the diagnosis, and I said, you know what? Still, I'm not going to medicate. Let's figure out perhaps the biggest where the biggest friction is. And it's obviously that it's school, right?
mm,
Kids spend what, 6 hours a day on average, 5 days a week at school. Um, and so that's a lot of hours spent in an environment that could influence a child, right? Because
yeah.
yes, the home environment too, but we'll get to that. So, yeah, I said, why don't we change schools? And so we ended up picking a school that was more laid back, that was humanistic, like child led. The kids didn't have to do homework or get grades. They didn't have to do anything they didn't want to. And at first, that sounded like there's going to be a mutiny or some crazy, right? UFC fighter cage and nobody learns anything. Um, but he did really well. He ended up doing really well. And that's when I started reading a lot of books about ADHD. And, I will wrap this story up in a second. I will just say that one of the things I've learned is that, there's so many books out there on ADHD. There's so many things, right? And when
Yeah.
you Google what is ADHD, what's the cause of ADHD, or what should we do about ADHD, if you just stay on the first 2 pages of search results, say on Google, you'll never get to the real information because it's
Mm,
one-sided. It's one-sided and it's incomplete. And the reason why I say that is when I talked about reading books is that, um, you know, I've read books on ADHD and meditation, ADHD on trauma, ADHD and even circumcision, ADHD and jaundice. Like, I really decided to not just stay in the ADHD box because that's what most experts and ADHD influencer, and so they're in the box where they
Mm,
only read information that's relevant just to ADHD, and they are inside of the mainstream narrative. So they're really boxed in. I
mm,
decided to just take in any book. If anybody ever mentioned that, oh, this and this worked for ADHD, I'm like, what did you say? Oh, hand-eye coordination sports. Great. So I would Google that. I would figure out what does that mean? How does, and I realized that only then was I able to really form like a wholesome vision or picture of the entire thing called ADHD, right?
mm,
So that's kind of when I started to think, okay, I need to get this information out. I want to start fast, meaning the documentary that I'm planning to do and that's in the works, it takes time, you know. The book that I've been working on, I've been ingesting stuff for years, but a podcast, I was thinking to myself, I could record and get it out there fairly quick, you know?
mm,
Like I can get the information already out. So if a parent needs it now, they don't have to wait for a documentary or a book, right? So started 5 years ago, roughly, and ever since then, I think we're over 200 episodes, and I've had the privilege of interviewing some really call them famous or reputable experts like Gabor Mate and Bruce Lipton, Bessel van der Kolk, Stephen Porges, just to name a few. And it's opened my horizon. Like I thought I knew what this thing is or was, and like the CDC. I'm still open that it's something different or that it's I don't know exactly. I can't say I have the truth, but at least I stay open where a lot of these experts are like, nope, this is it. Nope, this is it. It's done. These are the results. This is what you do.
mm,
While it says on the CDC website that the cause is still unknown, experts act as if they know.
mm. Thank you for sharing your story. You could have elaborated more. We could have had longer on it. I think I'll just share my story because, as I mentioned before, we have had similar journeys through this in terms of we're both writing books, we're both doing the docos, we both our children were like I guess the catalyst for this journey. And I'll try and do it short too, but I'm not sure because I like to talk. But I'll just share my story because it's quite common, and I don't think people talk about it enough. And especially with my experience being on ADHD forums for many, many years, it was a common thing that I was seeing. So if you don't mind if I share.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear your story. Yeah.
So yeah, I'd always wanted to be a mom, and I was lucky to become one for the first time at the age of 33. And before that, I was a daycare worker, a professional nanny. I volunteered for lots of children's charities, and yeah, I just loved children. So my dream was to have my own family. And my firstborn, my eldest son, he came along and it was a dream, I just loved it. I breastfed him for 2 years. He was healthy and happy and everything was working well. Obviously, we get the sleepless nights and all the things that come with it, but I really enjoyed that experience. And then I fell pregnant with my second boy when my son was 2, and I was quite sick. So my mum flew over from Spain and came and lived with us to help look after my eldest while I was pregnant. And during this time, I would say that the attachment between my son and I started to fray because I was sick in bed a lot, I was vomiting a lot, I was still trying to go to work, and my mum was the primary carer, but it still wasn't me. So that was the kind of the first incident that happened, which I think was a contributor to his diagnosis. And then when I was, so I'm getting a frog in my throat because I'm trying not to get too emotional. I shouldn't suppress the emotions though, should I? Um,
No.
so, so then I was Yeah, we moved house actually on the day that I went into labor, and my son had started a new daycare, and my mum left just after I gave birth. So there was so much change in my son's life at the age of 2. New daycare, his main carer left, new baby on the scene, and his behavior just from that point just got so out of control. And I mean, he was giving the baby, like his brother, a black eye when he was like in his bassinet at like 2 weeks or something. So it was really quite serious behavior. And so this was kind of when I call it the journey of hell for about 5 years, because it got to the point of me wanting to end my life because of just the journey I'd gone on with going to see, pediatricians, psychologists, spending thousands of dollars, dealing with daycares, schools, pickups, drop-offs, your son's naughty. Then the labeling started, and then the diagnoses of ADHD, autism, ODD, anxiety. And they're like with you, they want to say you need to medicate. Your child might have issues and you might end up in jail, and he might self-medicate when he's older, and it's kind of like all that blame and shame and guilt, stuff that they were doing. But intuitively, I was like, no, this is trauma. Like my son's gone through so much trauma. And I'm not coping. I think I had sort of postpartum depression after my second, and I was crying a lot, and I wasn't there for my son as much as I wanted to be. And my ex-husband at the time, he was using corporal punishment. And so all the things in the parenting books, like I used to watch Super Nanny, where, you're meant to put them on steps and timeouts. And I was following all of these the ways of doing parenting, and I had a son that was completely and utterly out of control. So I made a decision after that suicide moment. I thought I can't go through with this. I got to do something. And so I pulled my son out of school to homeschool him. And we tried at that point 3 different schools over 17 months. And I thought I'm going to have to just take the power back as a parent. We tried medication, Vyvanse and Ritalin, and he had significant side effects. Like he was like seeing things and having hallucinations, and he was chatting a lot, and he couldn't cope with noise at one point, and there was just all these side effects. And I vowed never to give it to him again. But as a mom, you're struggling. Like, what are the other options? Why are they not telling me other options? So I researched it myself, pulled my son out of school, and then I started applying it. I changed his environment. I parented him differently. I started, changing his diet. I connected with him. I took him out in nature more, to the beach. And it's funny with these kids, like you put them near nature, and all of a sudden it's like you've turned off the symptoms. And so basically, he was 90% improved, and I knew that what I was doing was working. I will have to stop the story there because unfortunately, things did take a turn, and my ex didn't approve of homeschooling. And this is what happens with parents with different views. It can go a different way, but I know what I was doing was working, and I think it's important for me to share that story because a lot of these children, if they're in a stressful environment or they've had trauma, they will get these diagnoses. And I know you're going to speak to that more, but I just think that as a parent that's gone through it, like yourself, we've gone and done the research, we've gone and applied it to our children, it's worked, and it's so important that we share these positive stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Appreciate that. And it's interesting, you know, your story is again similar because we had the second child arrive and we gave the first one a gift from the second one, right? Hey, look, your brother brought a gift, right? All the things you do. And one thing without going into detail, what I heard in your story, which is similar to our story, is that there's so much happening for a growing child at any moment in their life, right? Like
Mm,
from the moment they shoot out, I mean, it starts in vitro in the belly,
yes.
but the moment they come out, how they come out, the environment they come out into, the family they grow born into, there's transgenerational trauma that's floating around in the family system already. So you're born into that.
Mm-hmm.
And every child is unique. Every there's no brain that's like another brain. And every child is so unique that they have their own nervous system that reacts uniquely to the stressors in life. And
Mm,
you mentioned, there's the attachment, right? You're suddenly not available for your first son. So there's a fear of not being safe because mom's not available, right? So that is, in my experience, my research that is backed up by many experts who've been studying this for years, is that's a trauma that could cause a child to behave in a way that we then label as ADHD. We call it a symptom. Oh, look, the child can't be present, right, in the moment. They can't focus. Oh, well, the symptoms is lack of focus. So that's they look up in the DSM. Oh, that means it's the disorder called ADHD, right? Says
mm,
it right there, lack of focus, right? And so instead of, we don't look at like, well, why can't the child focus? Why do they not feel safe in that moment? Why can't they just be calm in that moment? Why do they feel the need to be over there or to be distracted by something? Or,
mm,
there's much more to it. I'm just giving a cliff note on the
yeah.
idea that trauma is what I've seen. This traumatic event doesn't have to be capital T event like an explosion in a war zone, right? That's a trauma. But like or physical abuse, sexual abuse, you name it, right? Those are capital T traumas. But then there's
Mm,
the lowercase T traumas, which could be as simple as parents yelling in the household, right? Not even necessary verbal abuse, but just yelling and arguing, and the child not feeling safe and walking on eggshells, right?
mm,
That's enough for a child to start daydreaming, like, I don't want to be here in this reality. It's not safe. It's not comfortable. I need to be somewhere else that feels safe to me. So they start creating these alternate characters' lives, fantasies, anything to not be in the moment that's uncomfortable. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I love that you mentioned that, like your son has been through a lot, right? And
yeah.
now a listener may say, well, but my brother-in-law's son had the same and he's fine. He's not ADHD. Well, again, yay, everybody's unique, everybody's different. So we can't sort of measure up against the other person that seems to be the same as us. And why do they not have it? If they don't have it, then we can't do that. We just have to
Mm,
ask each individual child, maybe not ask the child if they're too young to answer, but we have to work with each individual child and find out, like, why do they behave that way? What's the real cause? And
mm,
here, Becca, here's the coolest thing that I learned from Gabor Mate. I've learned a lot from him, but I was so frustrated. I wanted to find out, like, how can I logically explain that ADHD doesn't actually make sense as a thing? And I was like, because I felt something intuitively. There's something there that needs to be precise and short. So this is what Gabor Mate said, and I kind of added my own flavor to it. But
yeah.
basically, when we ask people, why do you have ADHD? They will normally say, well, because I'm impulsive, I can't focus, and I'm hyperactive. And sometimes they're
Yeah.
not hyperactive, but I can't focus, I'm impulsive, right? And when we then say, okay, got it. So why are you impulsive and can't focus? Then they say, because I have ADHD. But I say it again, why do you have ADHD? Well, because I'm impulsive and I can't focus. Right. But how come? And if you don't get out of that vicious cycle
Mm,
of
mm,
that loop and ask, why do I behave that way? Right? It's not because I have this made up label called ADHD. That's not what's causing the behavior. That's just describing the behavior. It's not
mm,
causing it, right?
mm-hmm,
But people have come to believe that the ADHD causes them to behave that way.
mm.
See how that kind of doesn't make sense? You have to like really go, wait, so, I guess the label isn't causing it because it's not a thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's a really great
So
point
how
to
can it
make.
cause the symptoms? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I just wanted to circle back to something you just said about a child that goes through what my child has versus, yeah, so my child's gone through that, and someone else saying, yeah, my child's gone through that too, but he doesn't have a diagnosis. My
Yep.
research was showing, and you may disagree or agree, and that's great because we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm like you. I think that we're constantly learning. So anything that's said on this podcast, in 5 years' time, it might have changed, and we can come back on and have another conversation. But it's really important just to keep
Yeah.
learning and growing, isn't it? And many of these people
Agree.
that, as you say, are pro medication, they're just stuck there. They don't want to know anything else.
Yeah.
My thinking is that it's a sensitivity like gene or whatever. It's basically that my son's very hypersensitive to his environment, and also he may have heavy metals in his brain. I've got amalgam fillings, so I've done research about heavy metals that can also be one of the causes. And so he may have had all of that, and then the vaccines have caused him more sort of heavy metals in his system, and then he's had these traumatic events and the stressful events, which on top of each other, there's a lot going on there. And over a certain amount of
Yeah.
years, I think he was diagnosed at the age of 6, but that's all of those behaviors have been going on for 3 years. And so, and no one wanted to listen to me, as I said. Like I said, I think it's trauma. Oh, no, 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 it can't be. You need to give it a label. So I think it's just important to say that the sensitivity for me is the difference between a child that can have those symptoms based on what they've gone through. Is that something that you found or disagree with me? I'm
No, I absolutely agree with you. I actually was writing a chapter for my book that was that included the sensitivity gene. Uh,
mm,
I won't go too much into detail because it's in the book, but like, so there's no ADHD gene. I will just break it for everybody. Sorry to Santa Claus is not real. There's no ADHD gene. There's also no gene for alcoholism, cancer. Uh, there are many what we call disorders that supposedly are genetic. There is
hmm.
no ADHD gene, has not yet been found,
Yeah.
but there is a sensitivity gene that, like you say, makes someone more sensitive. And I just want to insert here that that is not a disorder, that is not a disadvantage, that is not something that we should look as in like, ooh, sorry, your child is so sensitive, right? We hear
Yes.
this a lot. Oh, sorry, my he's very sensitive. It's I would want to look at that parent and say, great. Guess
Mm,
what? Their six senses, or maybe there's more, are so in tune. They're taking in information so textured and beautiful and so full, right?
yeah.
That of course they have overload because guess what? Our world is overloading us daily with so much information and noise that attacks our senses. And our
Mm,
job is to kind of not let in what we don't want in, right? And now imagine being 6 years old where your senses are so heightened
mm-hmm.
and all this stuff is coming at you like mom is sad, mom is not here, mom is sick, now someone new is here, I don't get attention, I don't feel safe. What's this? What's that? And at some point you have to check out. It's too much. You're not at that age. The brain isn't formed yet and isn't wired to handle that much stress. So
Mm,
I go into detail about that in my book because there's um, the brain creates sort of like a stress loop and they get stuck. It's almost like the nervous system is in a defense mode. And so now a young person whose brain isn't fully developed can't handle that. So they need to check out.
mm.
That's as simple as that, right? It's like not good over here, need to be somewhere else.
And I don't know about you, but it makes me really angry then about the way that it gets diagnosed and treated. Because as we both know, the most effective treatment that they push forward is medication. And I'm sure we could do a whole podcast episode on medication. Would you like to talk about that now before we go back
Yeah,
into your
yeah.
podcast?
I
Just
would
while
love
we're on the
to.
subject.
No, I'd love to. And I actually would like to start by asking you a question.
Yes.
What about it makes you most angry? What about medication?
I think it's because there's a few points that I'd like to make. And one of them is when I would go onto these forums, and I mean, I love research. I did a Bachelor of Social Science and I even had a whole module on it. So I really love looking at people's stories. And I would see that first of all, that people that medicated, they'd be like really excited, like, oh, I found something that works. And they would be like pushing everyone, anyone that comes on, they then push that narrative. Oh my God, it's helped my child so much. He's going to school now. He's calm, he's not being labeled, and even the child is like, oh, I'm getting good attention now. So medication must really work. And then what I would find is that I would follow some of these stories over the years, and it wouldn't be like that. It could be 6 months, and now they're on a different medication, and then they're on antidepressants or and like polypharmacies when you have to then take other medications to then combat the side effects from the first medications. And then I would just see these awful posts, and I actually started like anonymously copying and paste them into a document that's actually on my website because these stories were so horrific. And there was like mom saying that their 7 year old was just going nuts and saying they wanted to kill them, and he was on the highest meds possible. In fact, I've got the story here and I could read it out. Shall I read it out?
Yeah, go for it.
And this is a real life story. I'll keep it anonymous. This was very common, these types of stories. He's at the max dose for his weight with his ADHD medication. Recently, he's become extremely volatile and explosive, seemingly untriggered, throwing things around the room, screaming, swinging at me and his two little brothers, 5 and 2, threatening our safety and lives. He said he will burn the house down, kill us, and kill himself. He goes to his room and shreds it in an explosive trashing. I leave him till I hear the noises stop. I do stop him from, and then I didn't take the next bit, but he said, but this bit was really troubling. Do I take him to the emergency department for the psych ward? Do I call the police during these episodes? He is only 7. So I just want to remind you that he's on the max dose for his weight with ADHD meds, and now she's talking about taking him to the psych ward or calling the police. Now, as I said, this isn't isolated, this goes on and on. So this is just frightening for me. And then when people go on talking about holistic options, I want to change my son's diet, or I've listened to Gabor Mate about this is trauma, and or I've listened to Stephen Porges. Is it Porges? I always
Gorgeous.
Porges. The nervous system is stuck in defense mode, and there's other ways you can get around it. They get hounded on by other parents that they've got the diagnosis, they've got the medication, and they don't want to look at other options because they know that they may have to do the work. I know from just looking at some of your work, a lot of the help needs to come from helping the parent,
Yeah.
and so much in this community is about, well, if you're doing it a different way and that's a bit harder, like I don't have the quick fix, which is the band-aid, then I don't want you doing it. So I'm just going to hound you. And you'd have people that would be having to remove themselves from the group because they wanted to offer an holistic alternative. And just saying that, actually, I think that draws into a story that I did read in your manuscript. Do you
Yep.
want to share anything about that, or shall I just carry on?
Yeah, I mean, I can share. I don't think we need to go into the actual article or the story, but
Yeah,
there's a website called Reddit,
yeah,
very popular in the US, probably in Australia as well,
yes,
I would imagine. And I had posted an article about my sort of alternative way of going about it, making progress with my son's ADHD, with my own, with our family, like just wanted to share since the group said we were open for personal and inspiring success stories, even alternative non-medication approaches. It's
mm,
exactly what I did. And I forgot about it. Years later, I went back in and I saw it and I realized they had closed my account. They had banned that particular article, saying it was pseudoscience and that I was proposing things that most people couldn't actually do. Now, I never proposed anything. I just shared my story.
yes,
Uh, and how do they know that there aren't people out there who can actually do what I did? Because if I can do it, you can do it. I'm just
yeah.
a guy. So anyway, so I realized at that moment that it's the common sort of mainstream narrative around ADHD is so loud and so it's almost people have been brainwashed with it such that they don't question anything that comes their way. And the
Mm,
moment that, in my case, often I point out almost logical issues, not even scientific or medical, because I'm not a scientist or an expert, but a logical thing such as, it's not a thing, it's not like a tumor in your brain. When
Mm-hmm.
people say I have it, I just go, well, that's important that we don't say we have it if it's not something we actually have.
Mm.
You can say, I have ADHD, I exhibit ADHD type of behaviors like hyperactivity, impulsivity, whatever. Sure, I can roll with that. But, so nobody's willing to listen to all they hear is when I say ADHD is over, or even with my book, ADHD is not an emergency, they go, what do you mean? Because there's so much like their identity has been formed by this thing. They now, if you say anything that contradicts the mainstream ADHD narrative, they personally feel threatened.
Mm.
So that to me is a little sad and sometimes scary because parents are then told by these experts that this is how it is. And now, if any alternative thing comes their way, they're like, yeah, well, that's woo woo.
Yes.
We're doing the right thing because there's no other way. Our son is out of control, right? And so, yeah, it's sad, to hear even the story that you read. To think that would be sad for a 16-year-old, a 21-year-old, but for 7-year-old, right? To think that that child has almost no say at that point, and they're hurting, you know. Same in your case with your son, same with mine back then, right? Had we fully medicated him, I don't know what he would be like today, and I don't know if I would actually get really, if I was able to get to know the real Kai, or is it now the medicated Kai? Because it's different.
How is your son doing now, by the way?
He's doing great. I 9 years later, I can say much like what you shared. It's like we did the right thing. He is now in high school. He's getting good grades. He's getting mostly A's and B's, as here in the States. That's really good. He's got a great social life. He has a job already. He's working at a restaurant. He makes money. He, invests in the stock market through friends.
Wow.
And is he still once in a while impulsive and hyperactive? And yes, but most of the hyperactivity is gone. Impulsivity, I don't think he's more impulsive than I am at times, like
Mm.
that's a beautiful gift to follow your impulses, right?
Yes.
He's not reckless. He's going to go through his teenage years of struggling with identity, with alcohol, drugs, girls, all that stuff, whatever he's into, right? He's going to
Yeah.
kind of have his own challenges. He's human. But I will say that without medicating him, he's come this far and he's in 2 years, he'll be done with high school. And I know he's going to graduate with a decent grade.
Yeah.
What more would I want?
Yeah.
Like he's going to be either an
Beautiful.
entrepreneur or if he wants to go to college, he'll go to college. But he's very smart and he's very creative and very unique. So yeah, I would say he turned out.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing. Can't wait to see where he ends up. And I do
Hmm.
find that these children that are being
Yeah,
medicated, they've got such gifts and unique ways of looking at the world. And I think coming back to your question about my views on medication and why I think like that is I just feel like it suppresses their joy and their life force. And I know that when I've seen my child on medication, he's different and that just breaks my heart and in other children too. And I can see that with parents it's not their fault. We need to make that clear that we're not trying to parent shame here. You do what you think's right for your child. You go to the doctors and the pediatricians and you listen to the experts and they tell you these things and you listen to them because we've been brought up to trust these professionals and we don't want to think that they've got it wrong, but I think we both can say that they
right.
have. And I think they mean well with
Yeah,
what they've learned. They've gone to these establishments and learned what they've learned, but they're not willing to listen to different points of view where we're trying to say you actually have got it wrong. And there's many cases where they've done what we've done, the parents, and their children are absolutely fine, as you say, have turned out. Um, there is a time, I think, for medication as like a circuit breaker. And I think that you have the same view that if it's completely wild and like there's no other option at that point, then it can be a good circuit breaker. But we're talking there's also so many studies out there, or I shouldn't say so many, as a couple that I've found to show the detrimental effect of long-term use of these drugs. Let's not sugarcoat it. These are drugs. So yeah, there's that
Yeah.
MTA study that you mentioned as well. That I think that we've come across the same kind of studies to show that over the
Hmm.
long term, the effects of these drugs doesn't actually work on helping them in schools and things like that. Is there anything you want to
Yeah,
speak
there's
to?
actually so much I want to say, but there's the mainstream experts. Russell Barkley is a big voice in the ADHD community. Dr. Russell Barkley and his colleagues, essentially always say that these drugs will create like long-term academic benefits, right? That's what parents want to hear, right? Will they do well at school long term? The problem is that the study actually proved that it was only like a year or two that there would be like results you would see, right? But after
Hmm.
that, it would go back down, and there was no there were no great results, right? So they cherry pick the first part of the story that supports the medication narrative, but then when you look at the rest of the study, the research, it doesn't hold up, right? So we see this a lot, and it angers me too. And I just want to say is that parents will, feel that when they medicate their children, now they can sit still and now they can take in the information that they're meant to memorize so they can spit it back out, get a good grade, and go to a better school, right? And get a degree. And essentially, my belief is if a child has to be forced into that, it's obviously not right for the child because intuitively, energetically, a human being will feel comfortable in an environment that's comfortable for them. And when they're not, they either need trauma healing, processing, adjustments, or they need to go to a different educational environment in order to feel comfortable, right?
Mm,
But when you then give medication, you rob the child of and the family of the opportunity to A, experience a different learning environment that brings more peace and makes the child feel safe, and B, you rob them also of the ability to heal and process trauma like in the child, in the family, transgenerationally. There's a lot of benefits that you rob yourself if you just sedate a child to sit still in an environment that doesn't work for them.
mm.
Just wanted to say
Such
that
such
because
good points. Yeah.
it's really, really logic when you look at it that way. But most parents just can't hang with it long term, meaning they can't picture themselves diving in and readjusting the lifestyle and changing schools. And perhaps, and here's the big one, perhaps even give up the dream they have for their children. It's not even their own dream, right? I
Mm,
hope my son goes to Harvard and becomes a lawyer and then is successful and has a good life, right? You have to almost put that on hold if you really want to like be present to what your child needs. Because in
mm,
that moment, they don't need better grades and a better school and a degree and Harvard. They don't need that. Right now, they may need attention. They may need a change. They may need more safety, more, right? They just need stuff. And Gabor Mate always says that they're too young to express themselves. So it's a little bit like charades. And then we say, oh, they're acting out. And he's like, yeah, they're acting out because they don't know how to say it. So
mm,
they're acting out, right? And we call that
mm.
negatively like a bad thing. Oh, they're acting out versus again asking, what's going on with this child? Why are they behaving that way, right? Oh, because they have ODD. Well, that's a label describing the behaviors. That's not why they behave that way. So why do they behave that way,
Yes.
right? I keep stressing that because really that's when I got it, when I was like, "Oh my God, now I see the whole it's all made up," you know?
Yes. why do you think, this is a big question, why do you think people like Russell Barkley won't accept anything else apart from his narrative? Is it that he's being sponsored by Big Pharma and
Yeah, I
why are
mean,
they
it's
not opening their eyes to other ways of helping these children? Why are they so inclined to want to medicate?
so, yeah, it's a good question. So, first of all, I will say that, experts like Dr. Russell Barkley, many of them have a personal story. I mean, we all do, right? We all have some connection to ADHD. And he had a brother that passed away in a car accident who supposedly had ADHD, wasn't medicated, and didn't wear a seatbelt, right? So to me, it became a bit of a personal crusade for him. So that's one element. The second one is, when you've built up your life and your reputation for like 60 years to be an expert in something, um, it's hard to suddenly want to crack that and question it because
Mm,
you would undo your entire legacy. You would sort of have to say, oh man, I was kind of wrong for 50 years. Well, technically not wrong had you stayed humble and always said, let's see what else there is, right?
yeah,
But if you're like so gripping onto now, this is the truth, then you were kind of wrong for so many years. That's hard to admit, right? Um, and then,
yeah.
yes, there's pharma. Dr. Barkley, as many other of his like-minded colleagues, have all received hundreds of thousands of dollars from pharma, and that's public information you can look up. I have some links in my book as well about that. And that's just how the business works, right? So all these elements combined sort of gives you a picture, an image of someone who has an interest in the disorder staying alive, right?
Mm,
Because when I say ADHD is over, I would hope that somebody who really doesn't like ADHD, which most people say like, oh, I don't really like, I hope I didn't have it, or I mean, I wish I didn't have it, and you know, some degree of not liking it. If you really don't like it, you would want it to be over, and you would be more curious about like, wait, what are you saying? So I've tried all this, and it's still not over. What is over there? What are you talking about, right? But I get the opposite of like, you, off, excuse my language. Um,
I'll
you
bleep that
know,
out.
yeah, sorry. Uh, and I go, okay, well, then you get to keep your little ADHD existence,
Yeah.
right? And you get to keep listening to the same experts who validate that. So you're in this sort of, what do they call it? Like a feedback loop, right? You're just in it. And to me, there's no healing there.
Mm, just spot on. In fact, just as I said, reviewing your book, I don't even think I need to bring my book out. I was like, Roman's got it all covered, and yours is coming out in hopefully May time,
Yeah.
2025.
Yeah.
And I was like, we've got similar things going on here. And I'm like, you bring yours out, I'm gonna just park mine.
No, I think, Becca, you have a unique voice, right? I write what I write. I have my experience. You have yours, and it'll be a completely different book, right?
Yeah.
And we need multiple books sharing similar information so that finally it's a stereo conversation, right? So do not
Yeah.
pause it. The world
I'm
needs to
way
hear
too
your
busy with
voice.
the podcast and the film, actually. It's been parked for a while. Um, so you talk in the book about there's these five inconvenient truths.
Incomplete,
Incomplete. I was
but
thinking
but
of
they're
that. It must be.
inconvenient. Yeah, they're inconvenient for Dr. Barkley. Yeah.
Would you like to speak to those now, or would you like to talk more about your podcast? Because I'm aware that we've kind of skipped over that. So what would you
No,
like to talk
I
about now? Because there's so much, like we could be talking about this for hours, you and
yeah,
I.
no. Well, the podcast we don't really need to talk about. I think for those listening, like the
Yes,
podcast is called ADHD is Over, and
yes.
I have guests on there like experts, parents, authors, and we pretty much have the same conversation that Becca and I are having right now. So that said, if we go into the five incomplete truths about ADHD, I think that'll kind of give the listener an overview of what mostly is discussed in the podcast, right?
Yeah, now I know
Um,
you said there's quite a lot of podcast episodes. Do you have any idea, like if I'm a parent and my child's just been diagnosed, and there's I think you're 188, I think the last count. Which ones do you have an idea of which ones you'd recommend that they listen to first?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I don't have, excuse me for not having the perfect,
That's okay.
all the episode the episode numbers, but I would say for parents, definitely Gabor Mate is
Yes.
a big one,
Yes.
as you and I both agree, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the other expert that is just really beautiful to listen to because she's so articulate and so tuned in is Dr. Erica Commissar. That's Komisar. She is, I'm just looking up a few things here as I'm speaking.
That's
Uh,
okay.
there was there was a series that I did on um, all the doctors where I would, Dr. Gabor Mate on ADHD. And so Dr. Erica Commissar is episode 107.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I recommend that. Dr. Gabor Mate is episode 104. And then there's also a really great one with Dr. Marilyn Wedge, which is episode 108. Marilyn wrote a book called A Disease Called Childhood. And she's just very dialed in,
Mm.
when you hear somebody speak, and I think they all speak from the heart. I mean, most of the people I've interviewed do. When I listen to experts like Dr. Barkley, all I hear is head. There's no heart. There's almost an anger. It's almost like this is the effing information, and this is what it is. So just do it. There's that kind of, you know, like head-based, almost righteousness and anger, and that doesn't resonate with me.
Well, I actually, and I haven't, I mean, I don't like to research these people anyway, because it just angers me when I see their work. But for this podcast, yesterday, I did look at Russell Barkley's YouTube channel, and he did have an episode that was targeting Gabor as well as Erica, so two of your speakers. And I thought, I'm just going to listen to the first few minutes because I never even heard him talk. And it was about the Erica one. Have you seen that one?
I have not seen that
All
one. I
right.
just because she was just on a, I think it's because she was on a really big podcast called this Diary of a CEO.
Yes, which
And
has
that
millions of views, and then he's now directing that
exactly.
at that.
Yep. Yep.
And my nervous system went into fight mode, fight or flight mode, because I guess I am sensitive to this topic, and I just think e- treat everybody with respect and let everyone have their opinion instead of dissecting it all and putting your slant on it. I know that we're doing a little bit of that now, but we are doing it with heart. And as you say, I'm listening to the way that he's speaking and his voice and he's articulating, and it does have exactly what you say. Like I've been
Yeah.
doing this for many years. I know what I'm talking about. And then when you start looking at the comments underneath, everyone's, yeah, you're right. Yeah, who does she think she is? And he's just getting, yeah, yeah, look at all my supporters. And because we know what we know, and this is our research, let's remind everybody we've done all this research without getting paid. We're not sponsored by Big Pharma. We've gone through it ourselves. We've had the children that have had these diagnoses. I've gone to hell and back. You've gone your own version. I've spent a lot of my personal time studying this, pulling the research together. I'm not getting anything for it. Anything I do from here on in, like with the book, I'm happy to take the money and donate it to charity. Like, I don't care about the money. I'm doing it because I care about our children. I care about our children's future. And this has to be stopped. And I looked at his age and I was just like, please, can you wake up before you pass over and admit that you've made a mistake because you are taking these children's futures away from them.
Mhm.
So many families are ruptured from this, and they don't understand that their narrative is harming so many people. So, as you can see, I'm getting my
Yeah,
passion's
you
coming through.
go, girl.
And
Well,
I
that's called
just,
passion.
and this just angers me so much that he's taking down people that are speaking the truth.
Yeah.
I hope they all just wake up at some point. And I think that these podcasts that we're doing, and listening to you and all your wisdom, and you haven't done this for money, you've done it for a good purpose. And I say it's to give the power back to the parents and a voice to the children. And this is why we will continue this message. And we will
Yeah.
get trolled for it, I'm sure. And half of the community are going to be like, yeah, we love you, and half are going to be, we hate you. And that's also the law of polarity, right? Like
Absolutely.
You're going to get
I
both
love,
for anything that you do. Even Princess Diana probably got hate. So anyway, I'm going to stop
there you
there.
go.
I'm
No,
going to
that's
let my
great.
emotions come down.
That was awesome, Becca. That was like one of those, those monologues in a film towards the end where the main character is like, and I've had enough. And this is ending right now, which I
Just can't
love,
believe I haven't cried yet. Yesterday I was thinking I'm so gonna cry when I tell my story because it was just bubbling, but I was so proud that I didn't even cry once because I've had enough
Well,
tears in these podcasts.
crying is beautiful, right?
I know, but if you've watched my
Well,
podcast, I cry nearly half. Anyway, I'm gonna let you take over with what I've just said because I need to just take a sip of water and calm down.
no, that's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, so many things I want to say. Um, First of all, in the words of John Gray, the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, right? He's
Yes.
famous author. He's written a lot of books, and he's even ventured into ADHD. And I've interviewed him a while back, um, not for the podcast, but and it was amazing because he wrote a book. It's called something like How to Focus in a Hyper World. I think that's what it is. And um, one of the things I realized, he said basically that the medications that we give our children for ADHD, first of all, just so people know, in the United States, um, it's a Schedule II drug. That's a list of drugs that's Schedule II by the Drug Enforcement Agency, right?
Mm,
And um, they basically listed it's right next to, literally it'll say Adderall and Ritalin, and it's next to cocaine, meth, and fentanyl. It's in the same category, right, of highly addictive substances with a risk for addiction. John Gray in his book says, interesting, why do we give our children, right, these drugs that are technically, that our DEA says are, you know, they're outlawed, they're illegal, they're dangerous and addictive, right? The
mm,
same drugs. He says the only difference is we give the kids less than we would give or get from a drug dealer. So it's the same drug. It's just slightly less or watered down, whatever you want to call it, but it's the same substance we put into our kids' bodies. We got to let
mm,
that sink in, you know? And that's just to kind of talk about like the drug is a drug. Like when we talk about medication, so the incomplete truth is that medication is the most effective solution, right? Or
mm.
should be the first line of defense. Well,
Yeah,
that's not true.
yeah.
Again, there's been many studies. First of all, there's so many side effects. Dr. Peter Breggin is a very famous sort of anti-pharma, anti-psychiatry kind of advocate, and he has had he talks about studies where again, like you mentioned, suicide and hallucinations and anger and violence. There's so many side effects that are extreme, and then but there's also a lot of other side effects like growth stunting. There's emotional flatlining. There's sleep problems. There's many more, right?
Yeah.
And so when these experts say, and this was the same case in during COVID, when they say, "Oh, this is safe and effective," they're lying because it's somewhat safe. It seems to be unsafe for almost half the people, and it's somewhat effective, but it's not safe and effective because when you tell a parent it's safe, they're like, okay, good, got it. Nothing will happen to my child. Well, that's not true. The odds are not in your favor. So
Mm,
that's the issue I have just on the surface level, right?
mm,
And again, going back to your CDC description of, unknown causes. Well, if it's unknown causes, why are we giving these medications based on what? To treat what? We don't even know what the cause is. Um, so how come these experts pretend that they know or that everyone knows and that this is for sure the thing to give to a child to uh, have them manage their symptoms? And, why do we do that? It's unknown. So we're in the dark, but we pretend we're in the light. And that's why I think you and I feel this hypocrisy, right? This righteousness of people shoving medications down these children's throats, literally.
mm. Such great important points you're making there.
Yeah,
And it's funny when each of us talk, I'm sure that there's so many things that we want to talk about that you mentioned, and it's like, where do I go back to? But
please.
your five incomplete truths, if I just read those out now, and then we can talk to each point, or you can just choose the points that you'd like to mention. So here are the five most prominent examples of one-sided incomplete truths about ADHD. That ADHD is a medical disorder, that ADHD is genetic, which we've already spoken to, that ADHD is due to a chemical imbalance, that ADHD medication is the only effective solution, and we've obviously touched on that too. And then number five is here somewhere. ADHD is a life sentence because, as you point out, there are millions of individuals around the world that have outgrown their ADHD diagnosis by
Yeah.
using different modalities. And so these are the five, I guess, the things that the parents get told. And which ones would you like to sort of add to or speak to on those
Yeah.
ones?
Well, it's very simple, right? I'm gonna kind of take us through. I just brought up the manuscript myself because it's so much in there that I don't want to miss anything. But basically, if we look at number one, ADHD is a medical disorder.
Yeah.
I will just say to the listeners that that's not true because there are no medical tests to diagnose ADHD. There's no blood
Mm,
tests, no biomarkers. Brain scans are also not scientifically validated by the DSM as a diagnostic tool. So all we have is observed behavior, right?
yeah.
And there's a great there's a doctor, I'm blanking on his name, but he
Fred?
talks about oh yeah,
Fred
Fred
Ballman?
Bauman.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just summed it up as a doctor. Is the first doctor I've ever heard to say what he said, and I won't go into details, but basically he breaks it down to say if this and this and this doesn't apply, which it doesn't in the case of ADHD,
Yeah.
then it's not a physical abnormality, right, or a chemical one. If it's a no to all of these, there's no disease, and the patient is medically, physically normal,
Yeah.
right? And that group is called no evidence of disease, NED. They even have a term for it, right? But somehow he says that the public has made to believe that it is a physical thing, which is why people say, I have it. Or, oh yeah, he definitely has ADHD. So it's not a physical thing in the brain. It's not a medical disorder. So that's number one, right?
Can I just
It's all
interject there for
based,
a second as well? Um,
yeah,
when you're on these forums or even just, yeah, I've seen it so many times where they talk about medicating it and they go, well, you wouldn't, it's like asthma, you wouldn't prevent them having an inhaler. Or if they were diabetic, you wouldn't stop them taking insulin. And this is then how they turn it into a medical disorder is that a lot of parents will, if someone wants to try something else, why would you do that? It's a medical problem.
yeah.
And they always use those examples. And
Yeah,
that
but see,
really
that's
irritates me.
exactly, yeah, and that's exactly wrong because those are physical examples of things physically in the body that can be proven through medical tests that they are existing, right? That this disorder or disease. So they compare it to ADHD. I see the comparison, but the moment we blur that line, we forget what it actually is, that it's a psychiatrically diagnosed bunch of behaviors
Mm,
observed by someone subjectively that's different from insulin and diabetes. I mean, that's almost an insult to someone with diabetes because it's like saying, well, I observed you, I don't know, being overweight or having too much blood sugar, whatever. Like, I'm seeing it, I'm observed. It's like, no, it's in my body. I have proof. I have a medical test that I'm sick. I'm not making this up, you know? I'm not saying ADHD people make up their symptoms, but it's different. It's a medical disorder versus a psychiatrically diagnosed bunch of symptoms, right?
mm.
So very different, and that's what I wanted to get across in this first incomplete truth is that parents hopefully read it and realize, okay, so still a thing, there's still struggle and behaviors, so please continue, right? Um, if I may. Number two is that ADHD is genetic. It's also an incomplete truth. And the reason why I say incomplete is because, sure, there is a genetic predisposition that I'll talk about in the book. But when people hear it's genetic, what they hear is nothing I can do. That's set, right? When a parent hears, "Oh, your son's ADHD is genetic," you go, "Oh, okay. Well, it's part of it's the thing in his body, and so we're gonna have to deal with it, right?" But that's not true. That's basically an incomplete truth because epigenetics has proven that our genes get turned on and off through the influence of the environment. The brain develops in relationship to our environment, the external
Mm,
environment, right? So therefore, we can actually have power. We can turn on or off our own genes,
mm.
you
So even
know?
if it was genetic, epigenetics have shown that we can turn it on and off.
Yeah, we can actually,
Yep.
we're not stuck with it. And that's what's communicated by these experts is that, like, oh, it's genetic. Sorry, it runs in the family. Not true. Neither does alcoholism, neither does cancer. There's only predisposition, and usually it's the family environment. It's not the genes. But again, the environment can turn on or off a gene. So see how family environment can
Mm,
actually, potentially, yes, turn you into somebody with those behaviors, right? But you're not stuck with it. That was kind of the main message there.
yeah.
Then yeah, the third one is that ADHD is due to a chemical imbalance. That's also something I hear often. And I wanted to, I don't have all the details in my head, but in the book, I go into these details, where does this theory come from?
Yes.
How did it appear? And then some high level experts that clearly say, like, yeah, that was made up. That's not a scientific, there's no scientific studies. There's no, and these are like top people of the
Mm,
National Institute of Mental Health and people who've studied, brain chemicals for years and have done reports. So it's made up. It doesn't actually exist. There is no chemical imbalance. And then someone else made the point to say, well, show me a chemically balanced brain. Where is it?
mm.
You know,
Yeah.
is
And
there
I,
a
I like
model?
this quote by British psychiatrist Dr. Joanna Moncrief. I hope I pronounced
Hmm.
that correctly. One of the
Yep.
leading experts on this question. And she said the term doesn't really make any sense. We don't know what a chemically balanced brain would look like. People are told that drugs restore a natural balance to your brain, she said, but it's not true. They create an artificial state. The whole idea of mental distress being caused by a chemical imbalance is a myth sold to us by the drug companies. So
Yeah. And it
that's
really is. It's not a conspiracy, right? We often would say, oh, she's a conspiracy theorist, big pharma. No, it's actually, there's proof that pharmaceutical ads started to use that term, right? You could call it a marketing term. It wasn't a medical or scientifically backed up term.
mm,
Everybody just ran with it because it was cute, kind of like you said, oh, the insulin and diabetes, and then you're like ADHD, and like people just sort of pick up these like comparisons or metaphors, and now suddenly it's the reality, right? It's like, oh no, that's the thing I'm looking at.
yeah.
But no, it's a representation of it.
Mm,
So that's how the chemical imbalance theory came to be. It was a representation of some theory they had, right?
yeah. Yeah. And you've got all
Um,
the research to back up everything that you're saying here. So,
yeah, yeah,
number
absolutely. In my
4,
book,
you
there's
go.
all the links. And yeah, number four is we talked about it. ADHD medication is the only effective solution, right?
Yeah.
Um, First of all, it's not. There's again studies that prove that it's not. There's no sustained long-term academic benefits, which is what parents mainly want out of it, right? They want grades or the school to function, right?
Yeah.
Um, and again, there's so many side effects from these drugs. They are, I've tried the drugs myself during my research. I wanted to basically, I said to myself, hey, if I'm going to give this to my son potentially, I want to know what it feels like and what it does.
I did the
And
same.
right, you did the same. Yeah. And isn't it amazing how you just feel so like possessed or manipulated by this substance that I can't imagine giving that to a 7-year-old or 6-year-old. I mean, it's breaks my heart, you know?
Yeah, I took it and I took my son to a one of those indoor play centers,
Hmm.
and I was like, I mean, I know they say, oh, it's because you don't have it, but my partner, who's a clinical psychologist, he actually did diagnose me with a severe case of ADHD. But I don't see it like that. I have a lot of trauma in my life and heavy metals and things like that. So the last thing I would ever do is medicate myself. I love the way my brain works, and I'm very creative, and I couldn't do this podcast and the film and all these cool things if I took medication. But I took it and I was so spaced out. And I actually got really emotional that my son had been on it and the other children were on it because I feel I'm an empath. So I just couldn't believe that all these children, and I literally was crying in this center because of how it was making me feel. And yeah, like just a horrible, horrible feeling.
Yeah. It's I mean, I will just say to your partner's point, right? He's diagnosing you from inside the same
System,
box
yes.
system, right? So yes, of course, for him, it's like, yeah, you qualify
Yeah,
for that, right? You talk about trauma, and again, it's such a hard word. You know, people are going to have a hard time with it for years to come. But we've all been traumatized, and we
yes,
can't trauma proof a human being. Trauma is actually a gift, right?
yes,
It's helps us to grow, and there's
of
gold in it,
course. There
right?
is gold in it, yes.
So, I agree with you. Like I always use that example of the check engine light of a car, right? If the light is on and it's telling you something's wrong with the car, you can either put a piece of duct tape
Over
over
it.
the check engine light and pretend all is well, or you can open the hood and actually see what might need some oil or some refill or a little bit of massaging so that the light goes off, right? And
Mm,
that's kind of what it is like I feel like having a child in your family with ADHD is almost like a check engine light to say, hey, in this family, we may want to grease up some things, we may want to fix some things, we may want to move some things around, and then we can go much smoother, right? It'll
yes.
run better. That's my theory. I can't prove that, but I've seen it in my family. I've seen it in countless other people who did not medicate, who chose to, spend more time in nature, better diet, work on the marriage for the parents, like change the schools. All these things, ultimately, I believe with our son, it all contributed to dissolving his ADHD symptoms. I can't
Mm,
prove or tell you which one modality or one approach was the one because we did 57 of them,
mm,
but you do all of it. You work on all of it, and it can only get life can only get better. But when we medicate, which is to put the duct tape on the check engine light, eventually the engine's going to blow. And when a child that's been medicated for years turns 30, 35, I've seen so many horror stories of them now being also on antidepressants and on sleep medications, and they're still taking their ADHD medications, and they can't keep a partner in a relationship. They lose their job. All that, they're just a mess because the real wounds, the trauma that needed some healing and processing never got the chance to be processed and healed. So, you know, it's a choice. Do you want to medicate or not? There's no judgment. Like, I wouldn't. I have a reaction to that. But if somebody wants to, obviously they can. It's free will, right? But I would just want them to consider, hopefully, everything I said or wrote in my book or everything you say in your podcasts and in your documentary. I hope people consider all the information out there first, or
mm.
most of the information.
Wow, there's so many things that I wanted to say when you were talking, but I guess the first thing is I'd like to point out that we're about the children. We want to sort of highlight that we don't like the children being medicated, but if adults get diagnosed and they want to take medication, they have the autonomy to do that. They know how it makes them feel. They, they
Yeah.
can assess whether it's given them side effects, whereas children can't, and they also don't have these growing brains and these systems that need really great, diet and nurturance, and even from a parenting perspective, how do we parent them? And so, yeah, so I think you're on the same page as that, that if adults want to take it, then go ahead. We're like
Yeah,
championing
yeah.
the children, aren't we? And there was a second point that you said about the adults being 35, and you made some great examples there. But even, as I said, from the forums, children who are 11 are doing exactly what you're saying, and on all these other different medications and things. So it doesn't have to be when they're 35. And I actually know a story of a girl that I used to live with when I first arrived in Australia. And she was diagnosed with ADHD, and she's now in her early 30s. She's been in and out of jail, mental institutions, and her mom is still parenting her at this age. And so I actually say, I think I've said it on a blog too, that we these parents that medicate don't have a crystal ball, but from my research is that you're still parenting these children that have been medicated because you're still that care person. So if they are going in and out of jail, or they are in out of mental institutions, who's going to be looking after them still? You are. And in the case of this story, this mom, she's just so exhausted and she just wants to help her child, but she has been through, I'd say, 20 years of trying to sort this out and help her child. And she's still in the thick of it. You do not want that. You do not want
Right.
that for yourself, for your partner, for your other children. And I think that one of the things that I really would love to do in the film that I'm making is having a research study to show what happens, because I don't know if there's enough out there to show that when these children are medicated as a child, what does happen to them through adulthood. And I think that's a really important
Yeah.
study to do.
And yeah, it's a great point. And I will say to you that I'm very surprised that I've had a very hard time getting success stories, meaning from adults who were medicated as children who are now living a fulfilled life. I have yet to I've probably interviewed one or two, and I constantly ask the question and I posted and I said, hey, anybody wants to share their story, success stories with, you're an adult, you're still taking it, life is amazing, crickets. And that's kind of concerning because that tells me that there isn't, I have more people reach out to me and saying, like, I'll tell my medication story. It's horrible, but I want to share it, right? That happens
Mm.
all the time. And yeah, I just don't think that, I think a lot of people are hiding because they're now realizing maybe they made a mistake or with their children, or maybe the adult is embarrassed where they're at in life, right? And so I don't know. It's a weird, it's a wild west out there, and I just feel that I would love to hear more of those stories, but I don't hear them. I don't
Mm.
read them. I
I
only see
haven't.
little, right, little comments on a YouTube video. Somebody will say like, "I love meds and they've changed my life," but that doesn't tell me anything about how is their life really like? Like, are they happy? Are they where they're at? And so I just think, yeah, those stories do not want to come out for some reason. Maybe
And
they're
if
not
they,
available.
yeah, and if they have side effects that they don't even realize are attributed to the medication that they're on, and that's why they think it's working because, I can focus now and I can get my job done, but I have all these
Yeah.
other issues that I'm just having another drug for, and but I'm not associating the two. Sorry to interrupt the podcast, everybody. Just a quick message. As some of you know, I am making a documentary film called Beautiful Souls, which is in development stages. And my wonderful producer, Sarah, and we just thought we'd take the opportunity to do a call out for a couple of participants for the film. Firstly, as you just heard me saying to Roman, we are going to be conducting a research study into the long-term effects of ADHD medication. So if you're listening to this and you are an adult and you were medicated as a child and you would love to share your story, we would love to hear from you. Please just head on over to our website, which is at www.beautifulsoulsthefilm.com.au. Head on over to the casting call page and put your details there, please. All your details will be confidential. We're also looking for 5 families to take part in the film who are really struggling with their children being diagnosed with ADHD. They're either on the medication and it's not working, or you've been on it and you've been trying many different things and you're looking for a new path forward. Well, this is your lucky day, hopefully, for five families, because we do really want to help you put your family back into balance and it won't cost you a thing. So also head on over to the website www.beautifulsoulsthefilm.com.au and to the casting call page. Now, lastly, it does take quite a lot of money to make these films. And with tax time coming up, if you would like to make a tax deductible donation, we would so appreciate it. All the details can be found on the website. And yes, every donation counts to really make this powerful and impactful film. So thanks for your time. We'll head back into the podcast now. Before we move on to point five, could you just mention the word there, hiding behind these labels? And this is a really important story that I would love just to take a minute on before we move on to number five, if you wouldn't mind, because it's just associated with that. And this is from an Australian parenting expert called Dr. Justin Colson, who just
Mm.
posted recently on Facebook. I think this was only in the last couple of weeks. And he was sharing the real life story of a 12-year-old girl who in Australia had been threatened with rape by classmates. And he was explaining that his inbox had become a testament to a national crisis because he had been inundated with emails from parents and students across Australia telling the same story: sexual harassment, threats, and intimidation, followed by inadequate responses that protect perpetrators while punishing victims. And I know that schools are becoming breeding grounds now for abuse, but we won't go to that topic. But I'd just love to read this verbatim about what Dr. Justin Colson said, because it's very troubling. One 15-year-old girl wrote to me about being threatened with kidnapping and rape by a classmate after she rejected his advances. When she and her parents sought justice, the school's response: a 2-day suspension that conveniently fell over the term break. When classes resumed, it was she who was moved to a different class, falling behind academically as a result. Eventually forced back into the same classroom as her harasser, she experienced nightmares and deteriorating mental health while he faced no meaningful consequences. His excuse, are you ready? ADHD. Despite the fact that she also has ADHD. Another family shared how their 11-year-old daughter was sexually assaulted by a male classmate at an elite private school. He grabbed her, ran his hands over her body, and after being pushed away by another student, returned to force his hand up her skirt and touch her genitals. The school's response: they interviewed the victim without a guardian present, refused to notify authorities, and labelled it a hyperstimulation episode because the boy had autism. So it couldn't have been a sexual assault. Now, I know we're not talking about autism today. And, obviously, to hear what's going on in schools is frightening, and it's getting worse. But these real life stories are showing that schools aren't equipped, but that these labels are now being used as excuses for criminal activity. How, oh my God, like my mind is
Yeah.
just blown. It just gets me angry that now these
Well,
labels are being used. What would you like to speak to with that?
yeah, I mean, there's, there's what they call, right, sort of ADHD advocates, right? And it always rubs me the wrong way because usually what that means is people that are um, doing whatever they can to keep ADHD protected as a disorder and keep everybody with it, that they're accepted and that it's a superpower and don't worry, I get all that. It sounds nice, right? The advocacy for that. But again, that's inside the system. You're trying to justify this made up disorder that's now become someone's identity. So in this case, the reason why I mention that is because when they say, when you say it's an excuse, when they say, oh, well, I have ADHD, Well, let's break it down. First of all, you don't have it, right? It's the label that's given to a bunch of symptoms. So you have some behavior that has been labeled as symptoms that then labeled as a disorder called ADHD. So let's
Mm-hmm.
look at your behavior. So you have bad behavior, right? Well, guess what? Where's that coming from? Oh, well, his ADHD. No, we already established that's not how it works. You can't answer that question with a label,
Yeah.
right? You have to really ask, why does this child behave that way? Well, now the parents have to get past the, what are you saying? Are you saying I'm a bad parent? Are you saying, now we're getting into why Russell Barkley would call Gabor Mate and say, or tell him that it's parent blaming or shaming, right? Well, once the parent can be open, like you are, like I am, to look at a child's trauma, to look at the family's trauma, what went on, what's possibly going on for this child, right? Then you can heal and process that. And then that particular child isn't going to behave that way in school, and you avoid those kind of incidences. But he doesn't behave that way because of ADHD. He behaves that way because he's a traumatized child. Hurt people hurt people. So, how were they hurt? And how can we heal that hurt? A medication band aid isn't going to do it. An excuse of a label isn't going to do it. So, we really only have one option, and is to go look at the parents and the family. What happened there,
Yeah.
right? What's happening there? That a child would abuse another child. There's something that's hidden. And that's a lot of times parents don't want to hear that because you would have to, and we're going through this in the United States right now with politics, because you would have to admit that you've been hiding something. And when you are caught hiding something, your ego needs to defend and call the person that found you out an asshole, a liar, pseudoscience, Nazi, whatever. In the case of politics, people go there because they don't want to be found out. Like, there's no dirt over here under my rug. So don't even point at my rug, right? I think that's what's happening with a lot of parents. They're unwilling to put their own house in order first. Therefore, it's
Mm.
easier to blame the child and then medicate the child, because then you as a parent never have to look at, and I'm not saying it's always aware, it's mostly unconscious, right? Transgenerational trauma. But if we're open to look, now we're in. If we're not open to look, it's closed. And that's where we're at most of the time.
Yeah. Beautiful reflection. Thank you. So let's move on to your number five, because I mean,
Yeah,
just to wrap that up, that was quite harrowing, and yeah, it's happening a lot. So
it is.
I
It is.
my heart goes out to all the children at school at the moment that are being affected by that, but it's not their labels, and they need to stop hiding behind them. So the last one, number five of your, I keep wanting to say inconvenient, incomplete.
No,
ADHD
no.
is a life sentence.
Yeah. Well, it's not. It's very simple. That chapter is very short because I wanted to just make the point that, like, if you're familiar with, neuroplasticity, the brain can rewire itself into old age, then that whole life sentence is already out the window.
Mm-hmm.
You have no other proof that, oh, well, if you don't medicate now, or if you have it, you're gonna have this for life. It's like, no, that's already completely not true if you just simply consider the science of neuroplasticity. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I hear Russell Barkley and other people talk about how this is for life and the best you can do is manage symptoms for life, it blows my mind. I'm like, you're a doctor, and you like literally disregard scientific evidence that's been around for years on the brain. I'm like, what else do I say? I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm baffled by your ignorance.
And if he's watching this at any point, you think he's going to dissect us apart? He's like,
Of
hi, Russell.
course, of course. I wrote that,
We're not
at the end
doctors.
of
They're
my,
not doctors. They're not scientists. Who do they think they are? Trying to undo all my work. The
well,
proof's in
that's
the
why,
pudding.
yeah, and Becca, that's why at the end of my book, I decided to end with a really powerful quote, which is Joan of Arc said, I am not afraid. I was born to do this, right? And I feel the same way. Like, I know I'm going to get a lot of flack from my book. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to call me crazy, conspiracy, like pseudoscience, doesn't know what he's talking about, all that stuff. That's okay. I'm not writing this book for the people that are in that camp. I'm writing it for
Indoctrinated into the
people.
system.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't. I can't convince them. I can't even try to it's almost the same. I'm going to use that example. To me, it seems right, but it's almost like if you're uh, a Christian and you're trying to convince a Muslim that he should convert to Christianity because it's the truth. I mean, good luck with that. Like, I'm not going to go try to convince someone else to join my religion or my belief system. I have enough people writing to me and emailing and leaving comments that they love what I do and they agree and they've tried it and it's working. So that's the people I speak to, right? I want to speak to the people who resonate with my message, just like you are doing your show for people who resonate with it, right? And yes, there's going to be people that are going to make fun of it and they're going to try to dissect it and call us liars or conspiracy theorists. But okay, that's just a label. I'm not threatened by that because I know that's not who I am, you know?
You're certainly not. You're a legend in my eyes.
Oh, you're so sweet.
I can't wait
Uh,
for your book to come out. And I
yes,
can't wait to promote
me
you.
too.
And I just think that, yeah, what you're doing for the communities and for children and for the parents is just incredible. And there's definitely should be more like you out there. And you're not afraid to get
Thank
the
you.
hate and the trolls and that takes courage and strength and humility and love. And I just think you're awesome. Um,
Thank you. If I may say, I know we're pretty much getting to the end here, but
yeah,
I just want to say one last thing, and that's also how I end my book, which is
yeah,
that there's a few schools of thought, right? There's the thought of ADHD is genetic, which is what Russell Barkley and people like that believe in. There is the sort of Gabor Mate, which is aligned with you and I, which is it's trauma, stress on a human, right, on a system that causes these behaviors. And then there's a third there's also inside of that is the sensibility gene, right? So that's kind of a similar, but let's call that another school of thought is you're very sensitive, and so that's why you behave that way, simply said. Now the fourth one is a friend of mine, a colleague, Dr. Yaakov Ophir. He's an Israeli researcher, and he says, well, what if none of it is actually needed. It's just unique human beings and they're
yeah.
just struggling with their environment. They're trying to find their way. We don't even have to say it's because of stress or trauma, right? So there's like four schools of thoughts. But either way, whichever camp or school of thought you subscribe to, what you and I are doing with our movements, right? We're putting children first. We're giving them a voice. There's respect. There's not trying to mold them into who we think they should be, but trying to let them unfold to become who they are or want to
Mm-hmm.
be. And when we start there, no matter what school of thought you prescribe to, we start there, I believe we're on the right track. No matter which direction you then go into, as long as you have that foundation, we are doing a service for our children instead of a disservice, right? We're empowering them instead of disempowering them. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the win-win for me. It's like no matter what you believe it is,
Yeah.
please start there.
Such a great point. And I think there is another one as well. I don't know if you've come across it, by Anthony William, who is a medical medium, and the scientists would be like, "Oh no, don't go near that." And he
Hmm.
says heavy metals in the brain, and that's with autism as well. So that's just another, what do you call them? Another opinion, belief.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we've all got
Well,
opinions, right? But it's the ones that are trying to do good and the ones that seem to create harm.
yeah.
And I
And
think
see
that's the
the
important distinction to make.
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because I get a lot of people asking about nutrition or heavy metals, and that is in the same category as the trauma and stress because it
Yes,
stresses the brain, right?
yes,
So I just wanted to mention that. It's not that I am not aware of it but it's included in the stressor, right?
yes.
And so absolutely valid. any of those things could stress out a child so much. Like it would need a little amount for one child, and then the other can have tons of metals and not react that way. So we
Mm,
can't assume because some children don't have it, the problem, then no child should, right? So I totally
yeah.
agree with you.
Well,
Everything has to be considered.
and every child is different. I mean, everything from
Yeah.
hair color to eyes, but even temperament, every child. And so you can't, as well, I think, come back to the medication is just the one size fits all, given the medication. It doesn't work for these
Yeah.
children. And yeah, so we will start wrapping up soon, but I feel like we've focused a lot on the problem, and I really do want to end it with a couple of questions, but before that, some solutions. And I think that's really important because for those that are listening, are like the parent, like, yeah, I understand, I get you, and my son or my daughter's been diagnosed with this, but can you actually give us some help of what we can do? And I think that's just important to articulate here before we start wrapping up so that we can end it on some positive notes.
Positive. Yeah.
There was a parliamentary inquiry in Australia into the assessment and support services for people with ADHD back in June 2023. And I spent quite some time, again, not paid, my own time, writing a very long submission, and I did it to the inquiry, and I did focus on my recommendations and solutions, and I'll put that in the show notes as well as all of the resources that you've mentioned. And they did focus a lot on the positives of diagnosis and medication. And worryingly, they actually wanted ADHD, or at least they wanted to talk about should it be as mentioned as a disability. And I think we both know after speaking for the last however long it's been that it's definitely far from a disability as you can go. But what would be your recommendations for how these parents can help their children without medication?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question I get all the time, and I always preface it by saying I'm not a tips and tricks kind of coach expert, right? It's just not what I focus on. I probably could. I still believe a lot of that, those are band-aids if you don't actually do the real work, right? So my focus is more on like shifting parents' perspective away from the traditional belief about what it is and have a new perspective. And inside of that perspective, I would say my tips would be first is you have a diagnosis, first is this pause, right? And that's why I wrote the book because it's not an emergency. ADHD is not an emergency, so you don't have to rush. So, first, take a deep breath,
Mm-hmm.
pause, let it sit. You know, if you have a diagnosis, you're going to talk to your partner, husband, wife, whatever, all night for a weekend, and you're going to be like, ah, and just know that that's normal. Then pause for another couple of days, go to work, resume your work, right? And then I would suggest, you know, if there was a hierarchy, I would go first to the educational environment.
Yes.
If your child's in a school, it's probably not the right school for them because if there's friction, that's a red flag, right?
Yeah.
And then I would go to the family system, the parents. How's the marriage, right? Is there a lot of hiding? Is there infidelity? Is there anger? Is there alcoholism? We have to get really clear and clean up, like it has to be transparent, right? Do that work. Are the parents in therapy? Then there's behavioral therapy or therapies for the child as well, right? I tend to, one of my friends, Dr. Marilyn Wedge, who is also in my book and who wrote the disease called childhood, she always tells me when she works with families with ADHD children, she rarely works with the child. It's with the parents, right? So, in other words, if the parents are open to therapy, whether it's through child ADHD treatment, like she said, she would then work more with the parents, if they're open, that's to me the next step, right? Education, therapy, or looking at the traumas in the family, healing the parents' relationship. Then what you mentioned, right? Detox, diet, fitness, like keeping the child busy, lots of nature. An ADHD child will challenge a sort of comfortable lifestyle because often both parents are, at work. They're workaholics. They both have busy careers, and often there's a nanny, whatever. Um, and a child with ADHD suddenly will ask for attention, right? It's attention deficit, but it's not the one we think. It's like they're not getting enough attention. They're not getting
Yeah.
the nurture, the attention, and the healing they need. So it's disruptive. So the next thing would be like evaluate what you do for life, your work, how often, how many hours do you work? How stressed are you? All of it has to be looked at.
Yeah.
Those would be my tips and tricks is create that list and really go through and rate it. Like we did that at the beginning. It's like marriage from a scale from 1 to 10 was a 6. Why is it not an 8, right? Nutrition, 5. How come, right? You have to really get honest with yourself and your partner, and it's hard.
Yeah.
It's the best work though you'll ever do. I have to say, my life is so much better thanks to the work I've done and the work that our son Kai has woken me and his mom up to, right? Like that's a privilege. That's
Yeah.
like I would have never had to step up the way I did. And so don't miss that opportunity. Don't just medicate and sedate the child because you're missing out on all this beautiful growth that could come from that diagnosis.
Mm. Thank you for those solutions. And I'd like to add homeopathy has had a bad rap if you go onto the first couple of pages of Google. And that's in my paper. And I urge people to look at that also as a modality. And you're right,
Yeah.
diet, nature, and even the way that we parent our children. I remember I was reading all these parenting books and I realized that actually I'm parenting all wrong too. And
Mm.
I came across the heart-centered approach, I think it was, or something, and I've lost his name now. I remembered it earlier. It's gone. I've just
Howard, I think.
Howard Glasser. Yes, I came across
Yeah.
his approach, which was very energy based, like they're mirrors of us. So if we're not regulating ourselves, they will also hyper. And so it's really about connecting with your child with love from a heart centered place and understanding them. And there's so much work that a parent could do if they get the right knowledge around how to parent. And I think that's a really key piece in this because so many parents are so exhausted, rightly so, and they are overwhelmed. And the last thing they can be is the best loving parent because they are so fraught. So, if they can get the help and then come from a very loving, connected space with their child, it can make such a big difference. Is that your experience?
100%. I'm glad you brought up Howard. He was on the podcast too. He's such a great gentleman. And that's when I was diving into parenting because again, there's all these overlaps, right? Of
Yes,
trauma, ADHD, parenting, attachment, all that stuff.
yes,
And 100% agree. They are, and we are too, but they are constantly co-regulating with us. So if we are stressed, right, they feel that. And then we have to ask, why am I stressed? Maybe I'm in the wrong job. Maybe I'm stressed because I have resentment with my husband. Maybe we need to work that out, right?
yeah,
So I totally agree. It's like going deep, and that includes if you look at homeopathy or other alternative methods, everything makes a difference because everything calms the nervous system down and restores balance. And then
yes.
that's all we need to do, over time. Takes
And
time.
and guess what, guys? These don't have any side effects. And the reason why they don't like having them out advertised is because they can't make money from them. So,
No,
homeopathy is one of the most
no.
cheapest things that you can do for your children, and learning how to be a better parent and helping yourself with trauma, and you're going to do some self-help stuff. When I pulled my son out of school and I helped him immensely, I was doing a lot of work on myself. And that was a key part of the way that he changed. And so, on behalf of our two boys, this podcast is dedicated to them. And without them, we wouldn't be able to bring this to life. So, if Russell Barkley and his colleagues do want to tear it apart, I'm like, well, you're bringing it to more awareness. So, go ahead.
Exactly.
So, just to wrap up, what is your vision for how you would love ADHD to be seen in the future? I know obviously ADHD is over, and I know your tagline is, what is it? The struggle is real, but the label doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
So what is it? What would you love to see happen with this whole ADHD condition,
Yeah.
behaviors?
Well, great. I have sort of a three-tier. First one would be that ADHD is no longer considered a disorder. It's not in the DSM, right?
Yeah.
We've adjusted the education system to accommodate unique learning styles, and we're working with it and everybody's figuring out their way, right? That would be
Yeah.
number one. Number two is we drop at least the D in of disorder. So it's a attention deficit hyperactive, right? If you can call someone trouble focusing, too much energy,
Yeah.
you know, all right, still a label, but at least it's not a disorder, right? That's
Yeah.
sort of number two. Um, Number three would be that we just start to realize that, like, medication is too dangerous, and that we offer all these other alternative ways of healing, and that eventually entire families calm down, entire communities calm down, the world calms down, peace, right? That's kind of the hopefully that'll happen over time. So those are kind of my wishes. And like you said, I'd love for it to be, for us to celebrate the strength that we have facing the struggles,
Yeah.
but not to use labels as identities, right? The label doesn't have to be there. That would be my dream.
I love your dream. I'm just going to visualize it for a second. I know that in your book you did have possible alternative names, and I won't go through them all, but just a couple, focus divergence, adaptive attention style. There are other ways that we can call this because, as we know, the struggle is real. And then the potential impact for this is reduced stigma associated with ADHD, increased focus on environmental and experiential factors, greater emphasis on individual strengths and abilities, more supportive and inclusive environments for neurodivergent individuals, and a shift in how society views and interacts with people who have these traits. So I'm all for this. I'm your biggest champion. Apart from the doco and the book, I believe that you are coaching parents. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that work?
It's kind of like what my tips were, right? I work with parents who are willing to really like shift everything, who are like, "Well, you know what, we want to do it. Where do we start, right?"
Yeah.
So I kind of get them going. I'm not the continuous coach or therapist. I'm not an expert, but I send them on their way with, you could call it a consultation or several consultations, and then they will find their therapist. They may get a coach, they get a new school, right? So that's kind of what I do with parents, is a perspective shift, almost like a chiropractic adjustment, and then they go back to the world. So yeah.
Beautiful. And where can people find you?
Yeah, you can just go to ADHDisover.com, contact us through there, hello at ADHDisover.com, and I respond to, I could probably say, every email I've ever gotten. Hopefully I'm not wrong, but but yeah, I respond.
Beautiful. Well, you definitely responded to me, and I'm so grateful for that. And just to say that we don't have any ulterior motives for this. We hope that you can listen to this and you can feel our heart and the love that we have for these beautiful children. I call them beautiful souls, and our intentions are well, are thought out. And we hope that you just, yeah, as you say, pause, think, do your own research. Stop listening to the so-called experts and go away and really think about what's best for your child. I would just like to leave the last words to you, Roman.
Well, thank you, Becca. It's been a pleasure being on, and so glad we were able to do this. And my last words are very simple. Trust your intuition. I've honed my intuition for 55 years. I believe impulsivity is the way to hone your intuition, because when you make mistakes, you learn.
Yeah.
When you have success, you learn, and
Hmm.
you have to follow something. And if it's not an internal impulse, it'll be an external influence, such as Russell Barkley or medication or the government, right?
Yeah.
And you will always feel not quite whole, and you will always feel
Mm.
a bit manipulated and dependent, and it's not full empowerment. But I believe when we come from, like you and I, when we use our intuition to allow us to say this doesn't feel right or this feels right, we can't make the wrong choice. Again, if we make a mistake, we hone our intuition. If we have success, we hone our intuition. It's like an AI. It's our internal AI. And so I would just say, trust your intuition and, go from there.
Beautiful. I love those words. Just so much gratitude and thanks to you for coming on and having this conversation with me. I really just appreciate you and everything that you've shared with us today. And I completely concur with everything you've said based on all my research. and they need to look out for our books and docos in the future. So just thanks so much, Roman, for being here and just sharing everything. And we look forward to your book coming out very, very soon. And I can't wait to watch your film, ADHD Is Over.
Thank you, Becca.
Thanks, Roman.